Hi, my name is Brian. I'm the owner and operator of a sake bar located in Yokohama, Japan called the Meishu Center Yokohama. I'm here today to share some information about the wonderful joys of sake, which is also known as Nihonshu. So let's start with the ingredients. It contains just four ingredients. It's rice, water, koji, and yeast. Most everybody understands three of these four ingredients, but koji is probably the one ingredient that people may not understand. So koji is a mold, and I know the word mold doesn't strike up a very positive image, but this is a healthy mold. It's a mold that's used in other cooking products. It's a mold that's used in soy sauce, in making miso. It's also the ingredient that really differentiates sake from beer. So beer and sake, they're both brewed beverages. However, when brewing beer, you've got these different ingredients that are fermentable. With sake, you just have this one fermentable ingredient, and that is rice. And in order to make rice fermentable, you have to convert the starch of that rice to sugar. And koji is really what makes that happen. So koji is the magic behind sake as far as the saccharification process. Sake rice is different than table rice. There's over 100 varieties of sake rice grown in Japan. Each rice kind of has their own distinct flavor. Of these ingredients, rice is the one ingredient which will have the biggest impact on flavor for sake, whereas yeast, for example, will have a bigger influence on the aroma of the sake. So going back to sake rice, as you can see in this diagram here, this is a grain of rice. And the very core center of that rice grain is the shimpaku, which is the starch center of the rice. And the outer part of the rice is where fats and proteins are in the husk. So the more you polish and remove some of those fats and proteins on the outer layer of that rice grain, you get closer to the core center of the starch, and that will yield usually a more refined sake. Now let's talk about the grades of sake. And I think a lot of times this can be a mystery for a lot of people new to sake. Some of the terms might sound similar. So you have Genjo, which sounds like Genshu, and you have Daigenjo. What's the difference between a Daigenjo and a Junmai Daigenjo? You can see they're both at the top of the pyramid. They're both the highest grade of sake. And the word shu, by the way, that just means alcohol. So a lot of people will not even reference the word shu when talking about these terms. Starting with the top of the pyramid, you can see that the highest grade or the most premium grade of sake is Daigenjo and also Junmai Daigenjo. In order for a sake to qualify to be into that grade, the rice has to be milled to at least 50%. If you look at the grade just below that, you've got a Genjo shu and a Junmai Genjo. The minimum requirement for milling the rice is 60%. And again, that means 60% of the rice is what remains, 40% was polished off and removed. The lowest grade of the premium category would be either a Honjozo or a Junmai. And again, the polish ratio, as you can see, is 70%. And again, that just means that 30% of the rice was polished off. 70% is what remains. Generally speaking, you can assume that the lower the polish ratio, the semi-buai as it's called, the lower that number, perhaps the more refined the sake is. Doesn't necessarily equate to a better sake, more enjoyable sake. There's many sake that are made in those lower grades which are equally enjoyable depending on the skill and craftsmanship of the toji.